What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Coleman. We're my wonderful co-host, EJ Snyder. Got another two-parter this week for you. First episode this week is going to be recapping the division round and everything that happened in those games and kind of, talking about the adjustments they made therein, schematic stuff, X's and O's stuff, some emotional and mental stuff, talking about the intangible part of the game, because I think that played a factor in a couple of these as well. So we have a pretty deep dive on everything that happened this past weekend. And then part two coming, I think, the day after this week. We're going to do a special entirely dedicated to the conference championship previews, using everything that we learned from these recaps, trying to translate it forward into the conference championship game. So we have a lot to go over. I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. EJ, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm looking forward to it. We had good football. Yes, we'll talk about Giants-Eagles. It was sort of expected. The other three games I thought were very entertaining in their own right. We'll have a lot to say about those. And the two games we have coming are, like you said, some of the best games of the year. If you, from about the midpoint of the season, said, so if it shook out with the strongest two teams on each side, who do you think it would be? This probably would have been about a 75 or 80% consensus. Maybe Bills getting into the AFC mix still in the middle of the year, but as the year wound on, this feels like we got four really solid teams at the end playing for all the marbles. This is the best.
Definitely feels like, compared to some past years, we have even matchups in the conference championship games this year. So excited to get to that. But before we do, we have four divisional round games that we have to recap and kind of talk about how we got here, how things played out compared to how we expected, and what these games mean for the conference championships. We're going to start with Jags-Chiefs. And, going into the Jags game, I actually thought that from an entire top-down view, I did say the Chiefs were going to win, but I said the Jags were going to cover. Both of those things happened, but for entirely different reasons than I thought, right? The Chiefs won, but for a different reason than I thought, and the Jags covered, but for a different reason than I thought. To me, if I'm going to be giving any sort of MVP award out to Chiefs players, it's got to go to Chad Henne. The difference in the game, oddly enough, was Chad Henne, which nobody predicted going into this one. But when Mahomes went out late in the first quarter, and then he came back in, gutted it out, got to the quarter break, and then I think they got a field goal in that drive. Defense forced a punt from Jacksonville right after that, and then in mid to late second quarter, Henne comes in for his first drive because Mahomes is pissed. He's got to go to the locker room. He's got to get his ankle looked at, x-rays, all that kind of stuff. So they're at the 2-yard line, right? Chad Henne, when this game is teetering on a knife's edge, it's 10-7 KC. It could go either way. Launches a 98-yard, 12-play drive to get a touchdown and make it a two-possession game, 17-7, which then, with how long the drive took, it was a six and a half minute drive, 12 plays. It kind of limited the number of possessions that Jacksonville then had for the remainder of the half. Jacksonville only had one good possession in the entire second quarter. And so to me, that one drive was kind of what won it for KC because their defense was playing well overall. I know that Jacksonville did have some big missed chances. There was the drop by Kirk. There was the other drop by Ingram. Actually, Kirk had a couple pretty key drops in this one. There were some blown protections here and there that I was kind of like, what are we doing here, folks? This is week 19 or whatever it is. We shouldn't be blowing simple protections against fire zone, but they were. But overall, the Chiefs defense played well, even though the Jags did have some missed opportunities. But that one drive that kind of bought the Chiefs time to stabilize and get Mahomes back, even though he was hobbled and he could barely move around, it gave them some breathing room and time to recover at halftime without either being even or being in a hole. Going up, not big, but big enough at halftime to regroup was huge from a mental standpoint to me, because it still gave them the confidence of okay, Pat isn't out. He's coming back in. we have a lead, play good defense, run the ball, don't turn it over, we're going to win. And they did that. They ran the ball well with Pacheco. They played mostly pretty good defense. Again, Jacksonville, you could blame some of their own mistakes on that. A really bad fumble from Agnew late, the drops, everything like that. But overall, still good defense. They didn't turn the ball over, and they just survived, and they held on, and they did what contending teams do, which is if you give the opponent an opening, you stabilize, and if they give you an opening, you capitalize on it. That's the difference between Jacksonville and the Chiefs, is Jacksonville had an opening. Starting quarterback is out. Backup is in. Hasn't played all year. And they couldn't capitalize. They couldn't score, and they couldn't get him off the field, and that was it. I think the Jags are a good team. They will be back next year. But that critical difference in capitalizing versus not capitalizing is literally what separates the good from the great. The Chiefs are great. They survived. They'll have a tougher matchup this week. But I think credit to them, and especially credit to Chad Henne for literally saving the day.
It's a huge difference, and the one you bring up, I think that's probably most important, was holding together the Chiefs and the Chiefs' kingdom psyche. To have, when you have a hero, if we want to go to a classical reference, you have that one guy that can beat everybody. You have Achilles, right? And you see that guy go down. There's a moment where you go, oh crap, that's our chance. That guy represents our everything, our ability to win. And Chad Henne, of all people, comes in as the understudy to Achilles and says, I got it. I'm going to play really solid football. And that's what he did. He didn't go above and beyond. There were no 50-yard bombs out of Chad Henne.
His average depth of target was 3.7 yards, but it worked.
And it looked like that, but he did it efficiently. He did it professionally. He did it the way he was supposed to. He did exactly what a backup quarterback is supposed to do, but he did it in a really, really big spot. And mentally, it was a huge spot for Kansas City, and it did let them take a breath, take a beat, realize, okay, we got this. We can score even with Henne. All right, everybody else keep playing. Yeah, guys, keep playing. Chad's able to do it. That was tremendously important. And the other point that you brought up that I think is in play here for both teams, and it's going to be a theme for this show, we're going to talk about it multiple times throughout these games, is that championship difference. And you highlighted it perfectly. Making the big play when it's drawn up in the big moment is the difference. The Jags, as you said in the preview show, had them again schematically. It's not that the plays weren't there. It's not that they didn't come open. Like, Christian Kirk was open. The ball did hit him in the hands. He didn't catch it. And it's so schematically they had them. And before Chiefs fans go, schematically doesn't matter. They didn't execute, and that's the difference. You have to make the play when it's drawn up. Having it drawn up, getting open, it's all good. You got to catch it. You got to score. You got to get out of bounds. We'll talk about all this other stuff later on. But that's the difference. And so the Jags are right there. They were not pretenders. They're not frauds. They pushed Kansas City a lot at home. Yes, I know Mahomes was hobbled, but you play the hand you're dealt. And they lost by a touchdown because they couldn't execute, not just on one play, not just on the shot play to Kirk, but on multiple plays. They had their chances. They were there. Their coaching staff put them in position to make those plays and win this game, and they didn't do it. And they're going to have to think about that in the offseason. It's not that they can't. That's a very different thing. They're not lacking the talent. They're going to have to find that edge where they can complete those plays when they come together in those biggest moments.
I understand Jags fans' pain. That's what I'm trying to get out here. Is the whole offseason they're going to be like, well, what if Kirk caught that ball? What if Agnew didn't fumble out of nowhere? It's not like it was a forced fumble. He just fumbled. It's like, what if Trevor gets the rough in the passer call that Henne got, because they're very comparable plays. And it's a what if type game, because it is like 3 or 4 plays that are the difference in playoff football. And either you make them or you don't. Either you catch the ball or you don't. Either you fumble it or you don't. And I think when you're looking at a good team versus a great team, those 4 plays is literally the difference. Literally
Yeah.
the difference.
And I want to say a couple of things about the Chiefs. We talked about the Jaguars to start. There's about 3 things that I think are really important here. One plays with the Jaguars. Look, if the Jaguars couldn't beat Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes hobbling around on one leg in the state he was in, they're going to have to work twice as hard next time, because I, too, believe they will be back. And if Mahomes is healthy, that game looks very different. The Jags are going to have to be that much better plus to win it. But focusing purely on the Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes has been to 5 straight AFC Championship games.
Yep.
I'm just going to let that settle for a second. One guy has been playing for the ability to represent the conference in the Super Bowl 5 straight times, which represents every year he's played a full season.
Yeah. He's never missed it as a starter.
Right. Every time he's been a starter, he's gone all the way to the end, right, in the conference. Hasn't been to the Super Bowl every year, but he's had a chance to go to the Super Bowl every single year he's been a starter. That's not normal. It's not easy, and it's not to be taken for granted. What you're watching is a historic run from a player. I've watched a lot of football. This is not regular stuff. This is irregular stuff. So pay attention to it. It's not an accident. He's surrounded by a good organization, but he himself is a transcendent football player. He is a really, really, really good football player. And the other one is Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce is a hypnotist. There's no other explanation. Every week, very smart analysts. This week it was Louis Riddick and Will Blackman and a bunch of other guys going, you gotta cover Travis Kelce, which all of us say every single week. It's not like Travis Kelce gets forgotten about. He is the leading tight end in the league. He is one of the best players overall at his position in the entire league. This is not a guy you forget about. And this is a guy that makes the play over and over and over and over again for the touchdown, for the big third down conversion, to get him in range for the field goal. Every time it's Kelce, and every time everybody shouts, how did you lose Travis Kelce? And it's like the two things can't be equal. You can't have a primary shining star in the league who puts up huge stats and is the focal point of that entire very good team's offense, and everybody on the other side going, I can't believe you forgot about him. Nobody's forgetting about him. Nobody forgets about Travis Kelce, and they still can't cover him. I think he is a hypnotist. He lines up across from his defender, and he's like, this is not the tight end you're looking for, and he goes and gets open because he does it every single time, and that is not easy, regular, or to be taken for granted. You are also watching another transcendent player at a different position doing his thing. He will go to the Hall of Fame. He fully deserves it. It is ridiculous that he stacks the results week after week that he does, and it looks like everybody's forgotten to cover him. Nobody forgot to cover him. He got open every single time. It's crazy.
I mean, there's a reason why on the prize pick slip, and this I think was the only one that actually hit for me in this game, but his over-under on receiving yards was 81.5. And I was like, the Jags play more man coverage than almost everybody else. They're like 40% man coverage. And they don't got anybody that can cover Travis. So pump that one up. And I think he hit it like, I don't know, 5 minutes into the third quarter, something like that. So
he had an amazing first half. An amazing first half.
I want to put it in perspective a little bit. You mentioned the 5 straight AFC Championship games to start a starting career, right? Because he was on the bench for a year. There were kids in the Kansas City area that were born when Mahomes was drafted that have grown up knowing nothing but AFC Championship games. They had their little Chiefs onesies as newborns. Now they got their Mahomes jerseys. They can talk and form complete sentences and cheer and cry and laugh and experience the full joys of football. And they've never not known an AFC Championship game. There's going to be some elementary school teacher in Missouri someday, not this year, someday is going to have a classroom full of kids that are going to miss their first conference championship game in like 2nd or 3rd grade, maybe 4th, maybe 5th at this point. And they're just going to have like 30 depressed children in front of them that won't have weekend plans in late January for the first time ever. But it's not this year, EJ. It's not this year. And hail to the king. This is why we picked him to win the division, despite all the offseason hype of the AFC West. This is why you really never lose faith in the Chiefs, because as long as that dude is there running fucking read option on one leg They're the best, man. They're the best until proven otherwise. Well, there is one exception to that. The big bad Bengals. But we'll get to them in a little bit. We'll get to them in a little bit. Everybody else, though, the other 15 teams in the AFC. Yeah, Chiefs are the big bad wolf. Let's get to Giants-Eagles. This one we'll probably spend the least amount of time on for Giants fans' sake, because I know they don't want to relive too much of this, but it was a complete talent mismatch in every single way, shape, and form. I said it on Twitter that night, but I'll say it again here. This game was more, to me, the legacy of Dave Gettleman than anybody in the Giants building right now. That includes Dable. That even includes Daniel Jones, in my opinion, because we know what Daniel Jones is at this point, for the most part. He's fine. He is a fine quarterback that you can make a playoff run with, and you can beat a bunch of teams, and you can get to the show, right? And he's really athletic. He's a good dude. Studies hard. Locker room loves him. Executes quick game really well. Gets out of sacks. Gets out of pressure. Oddly amazing in the red zone. But there are limitations. There are limitations, and I think that he is not the quarterback that can elevate this roster to competing against an actual championship caliber roster. I think he's a top 16 quarterback, but he's not a top 5 quarterback. We saw Joe Burrow go to the Super Bowl with an absolute garbage offensive line. That's a top 5 quarterback. We saw Josh Allen drag that Bills offense kicking and screaming to many wins this year as their leading rusher and leading thrower, with their only consistent receiver being Stephon Diggs. That's a top 5 quarterback. We saw Patrick Mahomes win a divisional round game on one leg. That's a top 5 quarterback. Daniel Jones is not that. He is fine, but he is not that. And I think that looking at Dave Gettleman's legacy, with the cap difficulties that he put them in and the not good roster that he put together that this regime was saddled with, they put Daniel Jones in a no-win scenario where he had to go out there and try to go blow for blow with arguably the best team in the entire league. And that's not fair to DJ. It's really not. And I'm not trying to shit on the guy because he's fine. He's good. You can win with him. But you cannot march him out there to get absolutely blasted for 4 straight quarters by an absolute juggernaut and expect any other result. We knew what was going to happen here, and it happened. Giants had a great year. Dable is coach of the year to me. He's incredible. They have the structure in place to be in the playoffs every single year. But I think the divisional round, more than maybe even we expected, it showed that there's a larger gap between the top 4 programs in the league than everybody else. And I think the gap between the best team and the 8th best team, if you want to say that's the Giants, right? I think the gap between number 1 and number 8 is far larger than between number 8 and number 32. And it's almost reminiscent of college football in a way. There's a lot of there's very few haves. There's a lot of have-nots right now, and the Giants are trying to get to the have level, but without money and without more draft picks, because of the state that Gettleman left them in. That's not going to happen. So I think that, again, structure is there. Coach we love, GM we love, quarterback we're fine with, but they're 2 years away. They're 2 years away. And if you watch that game, I don't know how you can think they're anything other than 2 years away. They'll get there, but not soon.
Quarterback's thing, and we'll talk about it. Daniel Jones, he had a great season. He had one of his best seasons ever, his most successful season ever for sure. The Giants had a good run. There's nothing to be taken away from that. They exceeded pretty much all expectations, maybe except their own. Mm-hmm. But make no mistake, the best team won here, and by a lot. This was not a close football game. The Eagles gained, this blows my mind, 150 yards rushing before contact in the divisional round. Their rushers got 150 yards before being touched in a divisional playoff game. Woof. Yeah. There's nothing to say about that except, woof, that's crazy stuff. That is a huge gap. Daniel Jones, 135 yards passing. Yes, the Eagles' pass rush, way better than the Vikings' pass rush. We talked about that and how much different it was going to look because of that. Eagles' secondary, way better than the Vikings' secondary. Also, nasty combination to go up against. However, if everybody's looking at you as the guy that's supposed to orchestrate playoff-level play from your offense as the quarterback, and you come out and toss up 135 yards passing against anybody, that's not it. And that is closer to his ceiling than his floor. Mm-hmm. Everybody looked at the Minnesota game and went, that's his ceiling. That's his ceiling against a very bad defense. That's an outlier game for him. The best game he's ever played as a pro. Good for him. Came in bright lights. Nice timing. I appreciate it. If you expect that as even a near average result for most of Daniel Jones' game, you haven't watched the bulk of his career. It's going to happen occasionally, and occasionally is not going to win you championships. You need to make a move to create a weapon at quarterback if you're the Giants. Now, how they do that, we will see. There's lots of options. That's what the offseason's for. We're not going to talk about
Anthony Richardson. No, excuse me.
Saquon, 6.8 per carry as the other main focus of the Giants' offense. Saquon's a great player. They only gave it to him 9 times. Twice more receiving. 11 touches for the game. Again, the Eagles will live with 7 yards a carry from Saquon if he's getting it sub 10 times. Like, even if he's getting it slightly more than 10 times, that's not going to kill them. Their offense can easily overcome anything that might be a result of that production. So they just lived with it. They're like, look, they're going to run him sub 10 times. He's going to get sub 7 yards a carry, which is a very good average. That's fine. That's because what else are they going to do? Well, they're going to try and run Daniel Jones. We'll shut that down too. Jalen on the other side didn't have very many yards, but he was efficient. 2 TDs off of only 16 completions. He did what he needed to do. He didn't need to do more. We can argue about whether or not he could have. That's a different story. I said Goddard would be a factor, and he did. He was with 5 catches for 58 and one of the 2 receiving TDs. Again, somewhat expected. The Giants have been terrible against tight ends all year. And on the Philadelphia defensive side, Hassan Reddick, we haven't said his name enough this year. He has been vicious as a rusher. And combine him with Josh Sweat on Saturday night, and look, they harassed the Giants all night. They have lots of other rush threats. We're going to talk about those in depth as we get into this week's preview. But on Saturday, it was more than enough to keep the Giants off balance and easily put the Eagles into the conference championship game.
Remember when the Cardinals tried to make Hassan Reddick an inside linebacker?
If I'm a Cardinals fan,
I'm so pissed.
Or a Panthers fan, like I am so mad, and I know this feeling. You know, as a fan of the team I'm a fan of, there have been players that have moved on and had great careers elsewhere. Not a ton of them, but they do. And you're like, why couldn't you see that? Why couldn't you find a way, or your coaches find a way to leverage that ability? And yeah, if I'm a Cardinals fan looking at what Hassan Reddick is doing in the Philadelphia organization, I'm just screaming into my pillow.
I'm willing. Honestly, it gave me the most faith I've ever had in Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons, because I'm just assuming, like, if they go somewhere else, they're going to be all pros, you know? Like, it's just, I swear to God, the Cardinals are a fucking black hole. It's unbelievable to me. Anyway, not to get too off topic. Yeah, Giants, good year. They're not ready. I think the point you made of they exceeded everybody's expectations except their own is a valid one. They'll be back. Mm-hmm. They're just not quite ready for all of that. They're not quite ready to face down the beast and come out alive. They'll get there eventually. Giants fans just got to be patient. Let's get to Bills Bengals. This was a sort of rematch of a game that we sort of got, but not really. I think we got like halfway through the first quarter before that game, obviously got called because of the DeMar Hamlin injury, which he's, thank God, okay, doing well now. But we didn't really get to see a whole lot of these teams play against each other the first time around, so we weren't entirely sure what to expect. at least I wasn't entirely sure until I saw the inactives list. Because as soon as Daquan Jones was announced as not playing, I immediately had a concern. This defensive line was already not good at stopping the run, right? And we've gone over that multiple times about how they're atrocious against the zone, or against zone runs. Against outside zone specifically, they're like third worst EPA per play, average depth of tackle at almost 5.5 yards. Like, they're just terrible against zone because all of their interior defensive linemen, except for Daquan Jones, cannot work against these double teams. They get blown off the ball. You know, they're not good at stealing back gaps, as defensive line coaches like to say. Like, Daquan Jones was the only reliable guy against both outside zone and inside zone, split zone, any type of zone. He was the only one they could rely on. So he's out. Then by the end of the game, they're down 80% of the starting secondary. There's been no Von Miller for like 2 or 3 months at this point. Most of their starting defense that you and I saw week 1, tear the Rams apart. And so I wasn't exactly surprised based on all of these injuries that, the Bengals walked up and down the field and scored at will, and they got like 27 points, and they probably could have got more if they needed to. I wasn't shocked by that. What I was shocked a little bit by was just how exhausted and done the Bills looked. Like, they looked discombobulated, and some Bills players have even mentioned it since that game of like everybody was just tired. Like, this team looked tired. They looked done. From 4 minutes into the game, like, they looked like they just completely ran out of gas. Again, every other interior lineman was getting blown off the ball, so Mixon was getting 6 yards a pop. Samaje was getting whatever he wanted. Tremaine Edmonds and Milano did their best, but if your defensive line's getting moved 3 yards down the field, there's only so much you can do. The entire organization just looked done. And the Bengals looked fresh, even with 40% of their own starting offensive line in and 60% of it out. They looked physical. They looked angry, resentful. It was an incredible difference in vibes, I guess is the way to put it. One team that just looks like they're bleeding out on the field, and the other that looks like they're ready to eat them, alive. Like, it was not a fair fight. It really wasn't. It was not a fair fight. And I did not expect to say that about Bengals versus Bills this year, but just looking at all the injuries, looking at where these teams ended up in January, it wasn't even close, EJ. It really wasn't.
The wheels fell off. They finally did. The Bills' luck ran out in the snow in Buffalo. And let's be completely honest. I put up some stuff about Leslie Frazier and his future in Buffalo, and I got a bunch of Bills fans pushing back and saying, well, he's not responsible for injuries, and all the defensive starters have been out all year. That's disingenuous. That's not true. Yes, Von Miller was a huge loss, but they started the year without Trey White. He's back. They've lost both starting safeties for an amount of time, but they've both played. They've even played a little bit together. Linebacking core has been solid with Milano and Edmonds. Lots of the defensive linemen they drafted haven't missed time. Like, those high draft picks and some of those high-priced free agents still there. Daquan Jones has been there for almost every game except for this one. So saying that all of the Bills' defensive woes are due to injury, to me, rang a little bit hollow, especially when you're looking at the offensive line of the Bengals right across from them, missing 60% of their starters, and for the most part, not missing a beat, which we'll talk about in a second. But it's kind of poetic. We saw this train coming several times this season, and to the Bills' credit, they dodged it every time. We said, man, if they don't get it together, if they don't balance it out, if Josh doesn't play smarter football, if the defense can't buck up against the run, we said that over and over again. They still made the divisional round of the AFC playoffs. But their luck ran out. And it was because of Lou Anarumo's defense. I don't want to say the Bills just lost this because the Bills came out flat. That's bullshit. Lou Anarumo has made everybody look extremely human that he's faced for the last 2 years. So, Bills' credit, they've dodged this bullet a bunch of times. They weren't going to dodge it against a very good team. And yes, on top of that, they looked tired. They looked flat. They looked like they didn't have any answers, and they started to come apart. I would say don't underestimate several things. Injury, for sure, it factors in. It does with all teams, and there were some key ones. Trauma. This whole organization has been through a bunch, and yes, we got a good and lucky result. Damar Hamlin was actually in the stadium to witness the game. That's tremendous. That is the most important thing. Don't underestimate the cost to all of these players and their mental health and their psyche and their will to go out and do this. They're tired. They're mentally tired from all that, and they looked it. That's a thing, too. But before anybody gets heated about how I'm heaping on the Bills, again, Lou Anarumo has done this to everybody. For the last 2 years, for the top-tier quarterbacks he's faced, and this is courtesy of our buddy Ben Solak, the average EPA per dropback is .03. That's equal to Mac Jones this year, for those of you that aren't familiar with EPA. He's made the top quarterbacks. We're talking about Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, Lamar, and 2021 Aaron Rodgers, not 2022 Aaron Rodgers. He's made them all look like Mac Jones this year. That's not an accident. His defense is excellent. The fact he's not getting head coaching nods is a little bit of smoke and mirrors too. I'm not sure.
What's up with that?
I'm not sure if he doesn't want it or if some guys don't. Some guys just don't want the head job. Maybe lose that guy. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about him. But the fact that he's not being mentioned based on what he has created with what he has to work with is stunning, staggering, intriguing, whatever adjective you want to put on it. He used Mike Hilton like a missile in this one, and it was crazy effective. And he brought him from weird depths, angles for sure, but he brought him from deep a couple times. Josh never saw him. He had 4 pressures on 5 rushes. Mm-hmm. That's a cornerback. That's basically a deep nickel blitz. He did it over and over again, and the Bills, not only did they not have any answer, they didn't even look like they saw it.
Well, right tackle on the last one, the last forced fumble that Josh got detonated on. Right tackle fucked that one up, and Mitchell Schwartz was talking about it on Twitter, where like Josh slid the protection that way because they had rushed him 4 times leading up to that. So yeah. Josh did a half slide, it's a 3-man slide against 2 down linemen and Hilton, expecting that if Hilton came, right tackle would pass off. I think it was a heavy 5 in front of him. Pass that off to the guard and then expand out and pick up Hilton. Didn't do that.
He didn't do it. And the result was predictably bad for the Bills. On the Bengals side, for offense, Joe Burrow's not going to be stopped. He will not be stopped. He has a deep-seated belief that he is the best quarterback stepping onto the field in every game that he plays in. Now, I'd say most starting quarterbacks in the NFL probably feel that way. They've been that for most of their life. NFL might be, in fact, the first time that they are not the best quarterback on the field they step onto. But it's tough to say that Joe Burrow's wrong. Looking at what he's done, I'm not saying he's the most talented. He is not the most talented quarterback in the NFL. But it's hard to argue that he's not the best unless the guy across the field is a healthy Patrick Mahomes. Mm-hmm. Other than that, looking at what Joe Burrow has accomplished in his run with the Bengals and what he's been given to do that, it's very difficult to argue with Burrow that he's the second best quarterback overall playing in the NFL right now. That is one of those things. In the same way, in the same breath that we talk about Mahomes being on the field and saying, well, if Mahomes is on the field and he's healthy, the Chiefs have a chance. It's the same with Burrow in Cincinnati. There is no difference. I would say, straight up, healthy Mahomes, healthy Burrow. I'll take Mahomes just because he can do a few more things. But after that, there's nobody I'm taking over Joe Burrow because he has that killer instinct. We've talked about it over and over again. And they did. They came in with an edge. They came in pissed off. They came in angry that the league had assumed that Buffalo KC was going to be the thing and overlooked them, who'd made the Super Bowl last year. They felt disrespected. They were on edge, and it all showed. And they took it all out on Buffalo, and as a result, they're going to get that rematch with the Chiefs. And, man, we're going to talk about it, but Burrow's 3-0 versus the Chiefs.
I know. It's the one team that they just... I would take the Chiefs over the field, other than Cincinnati. They are. It's the boogeyman, man. And now on your note on Burrow being the second best quarterback in the league to healthy Mahomes, the fact that you're giving the second best quarterback in the league every third down is 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 4, because Joe Mixon is like just walking his way to 6 yards to carry, you're not going to win. You're not going to win. Like, I don't know about you, because I was watching that game on stream, and I know you were watching probably over at B-Dubs. Mm-hmm. It felt over after the first quarter. Like, it felt like there was nothing Buffalo could do.
It felt faded to me. And I don't mean F-A-D-E-D. I mean F-A-T-E-D. It seemed like the string had run out because Buffalo wasn't able to flex. And we said, look, if Josh Allen being a superhero runs out, right, the way they're playing, the amount they're leaning on Josh Allen, right, if that runs out, if he's not able to go out there and complete 5-7 big-time throws in a game, they're not going to be able to say, okay, Devin Singletary, go win us the game, right? Okay. Dawson Knox, go be Travis Kelce or Dallas Goedert or whoever else and win us the game. That's just not the way they've been operating all year. And so here we come to a game where conditions weren't great. I mean, Buffalo might have loved them, but look, if you're trying to orchestrate a high-octane passing game, it was not the best conditions for that, as evidenced by both teams' passing numbers. And they didn't have another punch, and the Bengals had lots of other punches. And the end result looked like, probably from about halftime, unless something radically changes here, unless Joe Burrow gets wiped out on a blitz, this is probably going to end with the Bengals going on. And it looks like, based on the play we've seen on the field, that's not a fluke.
Yeah, I think Bill's Twitter for the next 3 months talking about Bijan Robinson is going to be fascinating in the quest for finding that alternate punch. I'll tell you that much.
Look, Bills have some serious questions going forward. This offseason, it's already started, right? When you have that much pent-up energy, and we witnessed it. We were in Buffalo this year. We understand what that team means to that city and how much is invested in their success. And that success is now over for this season. It's a very successful season, not so in their eyes because the expectation was higher. The expectation was Super Bowl and win it. And they fell short of that. So it's already started. All that energy doesn't just dissipate. People don't just breathe out and go on with their life. They have to focus.
Especially not there.
No, they need to focus all this focus that they've had on the team and refocus it on something else. And it's already diving into all of these questions. This was their year from the get-go. Everybody said so. We predicted them to be in the Super Bowl in our preseason predictions episode. And it didn't happen. And then that's going to have a somewhat predictable result. What are they going to have to change to overcome all this phenomenal talent, the Burrows and the Mahomeses that inhabit the AFC? Because that's the rare air.
I'll tell you what they have to change. I'll tell you what. So there's a kid from Baylor built like a brick shithouse. Go draft him. There's a running back. Actually, there's 2 running backs from Texas that just bully people for a living. Go draft one of them. If not, go get the kid from Bama. Take whatever corner you like. Any of them. Don't even care at this point. Take one. Just cuz. And then take another receiver that runs 4.3 that can catch. Doesn't matter who. Take one of them. And then if you got time, draft some day 3 big bodies on offensive line for depth. That's what you got to do. Because the team is great, but good Lord, those holes up front are just, they're real. They're real. And if you're going up against a team that is tough and nasty and angry like Cincy, or Baltimore, or, when they're healthy, dare I say, Pittsburgh, like especially next year, you got to get tougher. You got to get tougher. You do. Like they're the flashiest team in the league when it's all working. But when it all came down to it in the snow against another tough team, they were soft. Like I'm trying not to be mean here, but they were soft, and I think Bills fans would agree with that. So, if that Baylor kid, his name is escaping me right now.
Siaki Ika.
Yeah, Vita Vea wearing green is what I call him. Like, if he's there, sign me up, because good Lord, if he was on the field for them, that actually might have made a big difference. It really would have.
There's going to be a lot of conversation all offseason. We can guarantee that. We'll hear a lot of it. We're friends with a lot of those folks. It's going to be animated offseason discussion about the changes the Bills need to make to, again, not only get back to this level, which is a very difficult thing to do in its own right, but to exceed, to get to that Super Bowl and to win it, because that is the expectation in that city 100%.
All right, let's get to our last divisional recap before we get to the conference championship previews. Cowboys 49ers. This one was even more painful to watch, especially if you're a Cowboys fan. And for me, the game was more on Dak Prescott, or rather the loss was more on Dak Prescott than Mike McCarthy, if we're talking about percentages. But McCarthy came real close towards the end for trying to take the majority. The clock management, again, third year in a row? Like,
yep.
How many times, even going back to Green Bay, how many times we're going to do this, where there's just horrible clock management or game management at the end of the half or at the end of the game. 5 minutes out when I was streaming, it was like 4 or 5 minutes left in the game, and I was like, call timeout, Mike. Call timeout. Because right now, when you're down by 7, I think it was, time is more important than timeouts. And he was saving all these timeouts on the off chance that they were going to stop the 49ers, and then, if they then had a 3 and out, they were banking on using the timeouts to when the 49ers were trying to bleed the clock back, to stop that so they could get the ball back again. And to me, that's a really shitty way to approach it. I would rather use the timeouts early to keep like 3.5 to 4 minutes on the clock, because if you get the ball back at that point and then you go 3 and out, you at least then still have somewhere, ideally, if you're just passing the ball, around 3 minutes left, right? With no timeout. So you can get a quick stop, and then there's another play at like 2:25, 2:20, and then you got the 2-minute warning, and then you can get another stop on top of that. And so theoretically, you're getting the ball back with like 1:15-ish, even if you still have no timeouts on the back end, right? You're still mathematically, if everything goes your way, you're getting the ball back with about 1:15 with no timeouts, not 50 seconds with no timeouts. So on aggregate, best case scenario, that would have at least saved them about 25 seconds if they went 3 and out. But to me, it feels like they were planning on not going 3 and out. And I get it. If you're an offensive coach, you plan to not go 3 and out. But you have to at least consider the possibility. You have to consider the possibility that you take an early down sack, or Dak misses a throw, or you get a drop, and it's 3rd and 10, which it was, and then you're screwed, right? It seemed like it never occurred to them that they were only going to get one chance, and they were planning to have 2. And it's like, no. If you're planning to only have 1 by design, based on bleeding a minute 20 off the clock on purpose, you are planning on only having 1 chance. And you're putting all your marbles on that 1 chance with a quarterback who had thrown 2 picks at that point and damn sure tried to throw 3. So for me, and I hope this is making sense for people that are listening on audio, because I know I'm just rambling here, time is more important than timeouts. If you're down by 7 with like 4 to 5 minutes left to go, call timeout. Give yourself a chance for 2 possessions, not for 1. Because if you only give yourself 1 decent possession, then you're ending it up with like inside your own 5-yard line with no timeouts, and you have to have Zeke snapping the ball and throwing to Turpin to get fucking folded by a DB immediately, right? Like that's what we ended up with because of that time management situation. So Dak was bad. He threw picks. He cost them points. But Mike McCarthy did absolutely nothing to ensure that he would get an extra chance at the end of the game, at least a real, honest chance at the end of the game. And that, to me, falls on him.
Well, this is ass backwards. I was going to talk about how cool this game was because This is a classic NFL playoff game. I talked about lore in the preview and that these two teams have a strong history in the playoffs. It's been a while, and look, the broadcast team brought that up multiple times with montages and alumni on the field and everything else. So that aspect got played up. But certainly the first, I would say, 3 quarters delivered. This was a defensive slugfest. Nobody got anything going. No touchdowns in the first half. Well, a touchdown, but no extra point in the first half. A very low-scoring affair. And it was a great atmosphere. Both teams threw their best punches, and it was really, really even until it wasn't. Again, I said this is going to be a theme for the show. Execution in the biggest moments. The 49ers, like the Chiefs, more hung on and survived, just kept pounding, just kept doing their thing. I realize keep pounding is a Carolina thing, but like they said, ooh, look, when we run the ball, we can make some cracks here. We can make some headway. We're making that. We weren't in the first half, but it's starting to work. Elijah Mitchell is starting to get pushed behind that offensive line. We're just going to keep going, keep the hammer down. And then, look, we're going to get a big play to Kittle, and, we're going to get a few things. And they hung on and they won the game. Dallas had their chances to answer. It's not like the 49ers boat raced them. Quite the opposite. This was a deadlock game through almost 3 quarters. Dak has those moments. People on Twitter called those career-defining moments, and I would agree with them. These are the brightest lights and the biggest stages and how people are going to remember you. And Dak is going to be haunted a little bit by what he did or was unable to do in that moment, because he didn't. He basically sputtered and died in that moment, and the Cowboys' chances went with him. Now, it is a team sport, but at that point, you are looking at your leaders. You are looking at your highest paid players. You're looking at your highest profile players and say, go make a play. Now, they did earlier in the game. The bomb to CeeDee Lamb, that's a big-time play by Dak and by CD. Super impressive pitch and catch. Big play in a big game. You need some more of those down the stretch, and they didn't get him. They had time for him late in the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, and they got nothing. And at that point, the momentum started to shift. You can say what you want to about momentum, but you could just tell the weight of the 49ers, tsunami, wave, whatever it was, just kept pressing. They kept doing the same things. It's not like they came out with a wildly different plan and said, aha, this is a look you've never seen, which Shanahan will do occasionally. They said, no, I think we're stepping on their necks right now. We're just going to keep rolling and see if we can get enough yards, eventually get enough points. We'll take the field goal at this point because ours is better than theirs in terms of kickers. They held their line. It was barely enough, but that's what championship teams do. And the 49ers did it, and the Cowboys couldn't, and that's that.
I think your point about them not coming out and doing anything wildly different is valid. But they did make a very slight adjustment that I felt did make a big difference in terms of the 49ers offense compared to the Dallas defense, right? Dallas defense overall did their job. But we saw in the second half when they started leaning on Eli Mitchell inside. And I was kind of tracking this in real time because going into the game, I was like, okay, Cowboys have only seen 4 snaps of 21 personnel the entire year, right? True 21 personnel. The only fullback they played against was Kari Blasingame for like 4 plays. So I was like, okay, they haven't seen anything like this. So I didn't really know what to expect in terms of how they were going to match up. I kind of had my own theories. I thought they were going to go to like a 5-2 service with Micah as the weak side edge. They came out entirely differently. They played nickel into 21 personnel with Micah as the stand-up Sam over Kittle, right? And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. I don't know if that's going to work. It really did work early on. And they were doing their normal outside zone stuff out of 21 personnel, and the interior defensive line came to play. D-Law came to play. Micah set a hard edge, and they stopped it over and over and over again. The adjustment that Kyle made, and to your point, not a big adjustment. They've done a lot before, but a minor adjustment that the Cowboys did not have an answer for was they started calling counter. Because they're like, okay, you're going to call nickel into 21 personnel, and we can't hit on these scoop blocks on your nose and on your 3-tech. They keep beating us on these scoop blocks and not giving any cutback lanes. So we're not even going to try to do that. We're going to call counter. We're going to pin you in place. We're going to pull Kittle. We're going to pull use check. We're going to run this, like, I guess you call it HY or YH counter, right? And we're going to pin you guys in place because we're big and strong and we could do all that. And then we're going to have 265-pound Kittle and 250-pound use check coming at you with a quickness right up the hole, because Juszczyk can kick out the edge regardless of who it is. He can kick out the edge, and then here comes Kittle right up the gut, taking on like a safety or Van Der Esch or whoever, and that's not a fair fight either, right? And so they switched from zone to a lot more of this gap scheme stuff out of 21 personnel, and the Cowboys took way too long to stop being in nickel because they couldn't stop it. And they tried a couple different things. You know, they tried a different nickel package, where it was like more like a 5-1, where they brought in Anthony Barr and Micah to be the edges and 3 big bodies in the middle and Van Der Esch in the back, and that still didn't work either. It took them too long to adjust. But at that point, you know, Eli got his yards. They got, I think it was 2 more scoring drives off of that, right? And the Cowboys offense was playing so bad, well, really the Cowboys quarterback was playing so bad that suddenly became an insurmountable hole. So it was a great little micro adjustment by Kyle to start calling runs that they don't normally call. It's like a 6% rate for them calling counter leading into this game, so they don't call it that often. But as soon as they saw that nickel, they're like, we got to lean into it, and they did it, and it worked. So credit to Kyle for that. You know, I just think my main point is beyond that little game within the game, playoff football often comes down to who's the best quarterback and who's the best coach. And in this game, believe it or not, Brock Purdy was the better quarterback, and Kyle Shanahan by far was the better coach. And this is the result we get.
And as a result, we get, I do truly think, the 2 best teams in the NFC playing in the championship game. Now, Cowboys fans will howl and say they don't believe that. The results bear that out over the year, and I do think that's the case in this game. Was it close? Yeah. This game was really close for 3 quarters. This game was within a field goal for 3 quarters. Mm-hmm. That is as close as you're going to get. That is 2 or 3 plays either way for either team makes the difference until the 49ers sort of just push the Cowboys down, and that was the end of it. They ended up winning this one. I don't want to say handily, but I would say decidedly. Before that, it was an even toss-up, and that was surprising. Cowboys laid out their best shot. Their defense came to play. They held what has been an incredibly potent offense to like 9 points for more than the first half of play. That's a really good effort. It fell short. They were close, but in the end, it feels like we get the 2 best teams in the NFC playing for the title and the chance to go represent the Super Bowl. It's a good result for the league. I realize if you're a Cowboys fan, it's really difficult to swallow. Some of it does land on the shoulders of your head coach. Some of it lands on the quarterback, but some of it lands on McCarthy as well, and that's not really a surprise if you've watched McCarthy's path through the league either.
All right, that seems like a pretty good time to wrap up this show. Thank you to everybody for watching. Make sure to come back tomorrow, where we're going to be previewing the conference championship matchups based on everything that we talked about today, because a lot of this translates into the next opponent, obviously. We've got the best of the best, coming this weekend. EJ and I are going to be watching it from Vegas. So based on those results, we'll do our Super Bowl preview from Vegas when we're at Shrine Bowl. We have a lot more content, draft-specific content coming from Shrine Bowl, prospect interviews, daily recaps of practice, talking about what's going on over in Mobile at Senior Bowl while we're in Vegas. So we have a ridiculous amount of content coming. Hope you guys enjoy it, and until tomorrow, later.
Take care.